I keep replaying a late night conversation with a friend of mine. We were sitting in silence and staring at the city's skeletal skyline when he exhaled and said, "Life feels like a cage. Whether I build something monumental or vanish in a bottle, the cell door is still there, and the end is still death. So why push at all?" His words carried the same chill that once stopped Arjuna on the battlefield. A warrior who had trained his whole life suddenly looked at the armies before him and felt every ambition melt. If the price of victory is slaughter, if the reward of heroism is still a funeral pyre, the bow grows heavy in the hand. He asks, "What is the point?" And for a moment, the entire Mahabharata pauses around his despair. That question echoes down the ages in Kierkegaard's Dread, in Jung's Map of the Shadow, in the silent anxiety behind our glowing screens. Yet the texts and the thinkers we call ancient refuse to leave us with despair. They point instead to a presence vaster than ambition, deeper than fear, the presence we name Brahman, God, the self beyond the self, and they whisper that remembering it is the crack in the wall. And yet, all these crises, whether they bloom in a bar at midnight or on a mythic plain at dawn, share an overlooked doorway, the presence of something unimaginably larger. Call it Brahman, God, the infinite, or simply the great intelligence moving through things. Ignore that presence, and the world contracts into a maze of personal wins and losses. Turn toward it, and the maze becomes a mandala, every path curling back to the same still center. The Upanishads do not merely hint at this presence, they insist on it. They say the screen on which every life scene flickers, this silent awareness we call Atman, is in essence the same as Brahman. The distance between witness and cosmos is an optical illusion, like two mirrors facing each other and mistaking reflections for strangers. Krishna, speaking to Arjuna, takes that identity one step further. He reveals himself as the cosmic person, the heartbeat inside all hearts, the unfathomable intelligence choreographing galaxies and grains of sand. Faced with that vision, Arjuna's despair collapses into awe, and awe into surrender. This is often misunderstood. Surrender in the Gita is not defeat, it is the relief of giving back a burden we were never designed to carry alone. The burden of manufacturing meaning in a universe already saturated with it. Kierkegaard sensed this too. He wrote that despair is the self not willing to be itself in the power that established it. In other words, the prison bars appear strongest when we imagine ourselves as isolated authors of existence. To place the self back into the power that established it is to dissolve the bars. Jung, though cautious with religious language, glimpsed the same motion in the psyche. Individuation for him was less about perfecting the ego than about allowing a greater self, spelled with a capital S, vast and transpersonal, to emerge as guiding center. That emergence often arrives through symbols of the sacred, through archetypes that feel numinous because they carry the voltage of the whole. The modern mind flinches at words like God or devotion, fearing dogma. Yet devotion, in its pure form, means aligning the fragment with the totality. It is less about outward prostration than an inward bow. I trust the larger order more than my anxious calculations, therefore I act, but I do not cling. Under that understanding, effort becomes offering, work becomes worship, even grief becomes a form of praising what one loved enough to lose. You can feel the shift in small ways. A musician once told me he plays best when he forgets the audience and thinks only of the spirit of sound. A surgeon shared that before each operation she whispers, "Guide these hands," and for a moment her own competence feels borrowed from a deeper well. The Gita calls such alignment karma yoga. The Christian mystics called it practicing the presence. Sufi poets sang it as the beloved guiding every gesture. We recoil because surrender sounds passive, but it is the opposite. To entrust action to the greater flow is to remove the friction of ego fear and release energy for the task itself. One moves with a kind of fierce serenity. Outcomes matter, they shape the world, but they no longer define the actor's worth. Failures instruct, successes humble, both are folded back into the larger rhythm. If devotion is the attitude, then Guru, the guide, is its embodiment in human form. Not an authority who gobbles your agency, but a seasoned cartographer who has walked beyond the inner prison and can point out the hidden gate. Jung called such figures carriers of the self archetype. They hold a mirror in which the disciple sees his own latent vastness. The genuine teacher does not replace your journey, he accelerates it by constantly reorienting you toward the source you keep forgetting. Yet one need not trek to an ashram to meet that guidance. Sometimes the guru arrives as a book that refuses to close, a line of poetry that detonates in the chest, a mentor whose silence says more than lecture. The form varies, the function is the same. To remind you, in moments when identity contracts, that your breath belongs to something measureless. So the question is no longer, why pursue anything if death erases it? A more transformative question rises. What does the infinite wish to express through this moment, this pair of hands, this fleeting mind? Purpose ceases to be a personal badge, it becomes a channel through which the larger current flows into time. This reframing alters our original despair. The prison was the belief that meaning must be mined from achievements piled against mortality. The door appears when achievement is reimagined as participation in a cosmic unfolding. The labor remains, the code to write, the child to calm, the protest to organize, but it is infused with a quiet luminosity. Even fatigue glows differently when you sense that another strength moves under your own. Will the ego protest? Absolutely. It will call surrender naive, devotion outdated, cosmic purpose unprovable. Let it protest. Doubt itself can become a teacher, for honest doubt clears superstition and demands authenticity. Krishna never asks Arjuna to silence his questions. He asks him to look beyond their surface, turbulence into the ocean underneath. And so, if you feel the cell walls today, do not rush for hacks or motivational flashcards. Sit with the unease until it turns transparent enough to see what lies behind it. Recall a time you felt awe at a newborn's hand, a desert sky, a chord that trembled the spine. Notice how, in those instants, you were still there but diffused into something vast and benign. That sensation of borderless presence is a clue. Follow it the way a moth follows moonlight, even if the path is slow, even if certainty never arrives. Eventually, the mind may discover that the bars were drawn in chalk, that every breath is already a prayer, and every step a quiet choreography with the infinite. And then the question, what is the purpose, returns, but it returns transfigured. Its sting is replaced by wonder. What astonishing gesture might the vast make through me next? When the wonder dawns, Arjuna's bow rises. Kierkegaard's dread becomes leap. Jung's shadow turns companion. The prison dissolves, not because life is easier, but because life is immense and immensely shared. If these words stir the faint echo of that immensity inside you, stay. Each week we follow such echoes, neither sermon nor science lesson alone, but a conversation at the edge, where intellect bows to something deeper, where the finite means the one who wears every shape and yet is bound by none.